over the capital city,
In this chaos,
like the
find
eyes
my
of an
peace.
over the capital city,
Whatever.
like the eyes of an
In this
unblinking god,
chaos, find my
their
peace.
light refracting through the crystal spires that curved upward from the Cascade Mountain foothills, like the ribs of some dead leviathan. The architecture was beautiful and terrifying, a testament to a civilization that had mastered gravity, but had forgotten how to be gentle. Sarah Vex stood on the receiving platform of the high spire, her posture rigid inside her ceremonial armor. The armor was a masterpiece of kinetic mesh in white ceramic, polished until it gleamed like a mirror. It was designed to deflect blaster bolts in moral ambiguity alike. Around her, the air hummed with the sound of surveillance drones. They drifted like oversized insects, their lenses rotating, broadcasting this moment to the billions of citizens below. Banners draped from the crystalline arches, snapping in the high-altitude wind. They bore the Dominion's sigil, a single unblinking eye, and the word that had choked Sarah's society for the past decade: purity. Sarah hated that word. It tasted like ash in her mouth. She kept her face impassive, a mask of warrior diplomat perfection, but her resonance was already active, prowling the air like an invisible animal. This was her gift, the genetic anomaly that made her a high-value asset to the magistrate and a terrifying presence at dinner parties. She did not just hear words. She felt the emotional harmonics beneath them. A junior aide to her left, a Veyron with pale, iridescent skin, leaned in. "The human delegation is docking, my lady. The Peace Chancellor expects a flawless ceremony." "It will be flawless," Sarah said. "We must project strength," the aide whispered, his anxiety spiking. Sarah felt his fear as a vibration in her teeth, a low, buzzing irritant. But beneath the fear, she tasted something else in his voice, a metallic tang, cold and hard and bitter. He was lying. He did not care about strength. He was worried about something specific, something hidden. Before she could press him, the docking clamps engaged with a thunderous clank that vibrated through the deck plates. The airlock hissed open, venting pressurized atmosphere in a cloud of white vapor. The humans emerged. They were softer than Varen, lacking the natural dermal plating and the tall, willowy tensile strength of her people. They looked fragile, wrapped in their dark synthetic suits, blinking against the harsh double sunlight. At the lead was a man who looked like he had been reviewing data packets until 3 seconds ago. He was young for a diplomat, with messy dark hair that defied the geometric precision of Varen fashion, and gray eyes that darted around the platform, taking in the drones, the guards, the architecture, with the hunger of an analyst. This was Marcus Thorne. He stopped at the designated marker, a circle of gold inlaid in the floor. He looked uncomfortable, tugging slightly at his collar. He cleared his throat, looked up at Sarah, and tapped the small translation node behind his ear. Sarah stepped forward, towering over him by half a foot. She waited. Protocol dictated the visitor speak first. Marcus straightened his spine. He looked nervous, but there was a spark of humor in his eyes, a resilience that refused to be crushed by the pageantry. "Greetings, High Counselor," Marcus said, his voice amplified by the platform's acoustics. "I come on behalf of the Terran Coalition to extend our open hands in our deepest desire for cooperation." That was what he meant to say. What actually came out of the universal translator, booming across the plaza and echoing off the crystal spires, was a guttural Varen phrase used exclusively in the red light districts of the lower city. "Greetings, High Counselor. I come on behalf of the Terran Coalition to extend my naked limbs and my deepest desire for your mating heat." The silence that followed was absolute. The Veyron guards behind Sarah stiffened, their hands dropping to the shock pikes at their belts. The Peace Chancellor, standing on the upper dais, froze mid-breath. The drones zoomed in, hungry for the diplomatic incident. Marcus frowned, tapping his earpiece again. He looked at the horrified faces of his own team, then up at Sarah. "Did I say that right?" he whispered, the microphone still hot. It sounded a little moist. Sarah felt the shockwave of his embarrassment hit her resonance like a splash of cold water. It was genuine. There was no malice, no sabotage, just a catastrophic failure of cheap human technology. A laugh bubbled up in her chest. It was a dangerous thing, a crack in her armor, but the absurdity was overwhelming. She clamped her jaw shut, killing the smile before it could reach her lips. She stared down at him, her golden eyes burning with mock severity. Envoy Thorne, Sarah said, her voice smooth and projecting authority. In the future, I suggest you keep your desires to yourself until the treaty is signed. Marcus went pale as the realization hit him. Oh, oh no. We accept your enthusiasm, Sarah continued, turning to the cameras to salvage the moment. The Dominion values passion in its allies. She gestured for the procession to move. As Marcus passed her, walking with the stiff gait of a man who wanted to dissolve into the floor, he muttered under his breath, I am going to kill the tech guy. I'm going to strangle him with a patch cable. Sarah sensed his mortification. It tasted like sour lemon, sharp and clean. But beneath it, she felt his relief that she hadn't ordered him executed. It was a warm, steady hum. He was grateful. Walk tall, Envoy, she murmured as he passed, barely moving her lips. And check your settings. You are on the violent dialect. He glanced at her, surprised. For a second, their eyes met. He didn't look at her like a superior officer or an alien threat. He looked at her like a co-conspirator in a bad joke. That was the moment the world ended. It didn't happen with a roar. It didn't happen with a scream. They had moved to the central plaza for the formal exchange of gifts. The Peace Chancellor, a bloated Veyron bureaucrat named Vorian, was standing on a floating gravity disk, holding a data crystal aloft. The crowd was cheering, a synchronized, rhythmic sound that the Dominion required of its citizens. Sarah was scanning the perimeter. Her resonance was itching. That metallic taste she had sensed earlier from her aide was back, but stronger now. It was everywhere, like the air was saturated with iron filings. She looked at Marcus. He wasn't watching the Chancellor. He was watching the crowd. He frowned, stepping out of the diplomatic line. Envoy, Sarah said, her voice sharp. Hold your position. That courier, Marcus said, pointing to a cloaked figure weaving through the security cordon. He's carrying a Class 4 dampener case. That's not on the manifest. Marcus didn't wait for permission. He moved. He was faster than he looked, sprinting away from the safe zone, diving through the line of stunned guards. Stop him! A commander shouted. Marcus tackled the courier near the base of the Chancellor's platform. The courier dropped the case. Sarah saw the device inside as it skittered across the polished stone. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a small silver sphere that bloomed open like a flower. Down, Sarah screamed, throwing up a kinetic shield. The vacuum bloom detonated. It was a weapon of terrifying elegance. It did not push air out. It consumed it. In a sphere 300 feet wide, the atmosphere vanished instantly. Sound died. The cheering crowd was silenced as their lungs emptied. The fire that followed didn't burn. It unmade. Without oxygen to feed it, the explosion was a flash of pure cold photonic energy. A white hole in reality. The Peace Chancellor's gravity disk collapsed. Vorian disintegrated, his molecular bonds severed by the sudden pressure drop. The banners turned to dust. The crystal ribs of the nearest tower cracked, silent fissures racing up toward the sky. Then the air rushed back in. The thunderclap was deafening. It hit Sarah's shield like a physical hammer, driving her to her knees. Dust and debris exploded outward. Sarah gasped, her ears ringing, her resonance screaming in agony, as thousands of people felt sudden, overwhelming terror. It hit her mind like a tidal wave, panic, pain, confusion. She gritted her teeth, forcing the mental shields up, filtering the chaos into background noise. She stood up amidst the smoke. Secure the perimeter, she roared, her voice cutting through the wailing of the wounded. She looked toward the blast crater. Marcus was on the ground, coughing violently, his face covered in white dust. He was alive. He was trying to crawl toward the courier he had tackled, but the courier was gone, vaporized or escaped. Don't move! A squad of elite Dominion shock troopers descended from the sky, their gravity boots slamming into the pavement. They surrounded Marcus, weapons leveled at his head. Wait, Marcus coughed, raising his hands. I tried to stop it, the case. Above the plaza, the giant holographic propaganda screens flickered. The regular programming, the purity anthem, cut out. Citizens of New Cascadia. The voice was deep, resonant, and trembling with manufactured outrage. General Draven appeared on the screens. He was the commander of the war faction, a scarred Veyron with eyes like chips of flint and a jagged scar across his left eye. We have been betrayed, Draven announced. Behold the assassin. The screen shifted. It showed footage of the plaza from moments ago. Sarah watched, horrified. The footage was crisp and clear. It showed Marcus breaking the diplomatic line. It showed him running toward the chancellor. But in this video, there was no courier. The editing was seamless, done in real time by an AI of impossible sophistication. In the video, Marcus wasn't tackling anyone. He was sprinting toward the platform, pulling the silver sphere from his own jacket, and hurling it at the chancellor before diving for cover. "No," Sarah whispered. "He brought the bomb," a woman in the crowd screamed. The mob, stunned a moment ago, turned instantly feral. The shock transformed into rage. They surged against the police barriers, spitting ritual dust, screaming for blood. Sarah moved. She didn't think. She reacted. She engaged her boot thrusters and leaped over the heads of the guards, landing hard between Marcus and the firing squad. "Stand down," Sarah ordered. "He is a terrorist," the lead trooper growled. "Step aside, Diplomat Vex." "He is a diplomatic envoy under my protection until proven guilty," Sarah snapped. She turned to Marcus. He was on his knees, blood trickling from his nose, his eyes wide with shock. She grabbed the front of his jacket and hauled him up, pulling his face close to hers. "Did you do it?" she demanded. "No," Marcus shouted. "I saw a courier, a Veyron male, cloaked, heavy gait. He dropped the charge. The footage. Sarah, it's fake. It's a lie." Sarah opened her senses. She dropped every barrier she had and let his voice hit her raw nerves. If he were lying, it would taste like cold iron. It would taste like rot. His words hit her chest like a blast of heat, blindingly bright, solid. He was terrified, he was angry, and he was innocent. The purity of his honesty was so intense it almost made her dizzy. "I believe you," she whispered. "How touching." The crowd parted. General Draven strode through the dust, his cape billowing behind him. He looked at the destruction with a satisfaction he barely concealed, then turned his flint eyes to Sarah. "The footage is conclusive, Diplomat Vex," Draven said, his voice carrying to the cameras. "The footage was doctored," Sarah said, her voice steady. "My resonance confirms his innocence. He speaks the truth." Draven sneered. "Your resonance or your infatuation?" He gestured to the screen where a freeze frame of Sarah and Marcus's earlier interaction was displayed. The moment where she had almost smiled, the moment where he had whispered to her. Draven twisted the context instantly. "We saw you," Draven said, pointing a gauntleted finger. "We saw the whispers, the intimacy. You are compromised, Vex. You are letting a biological impulse cloud your judgment of a national threat." "That is absurd," Sarah said. "I met him 10 minutes ago." "And yet you stand between him and justice," Draven roared, playing to the crowd. "This is why aliens cannot be trusted. They corrupt our bloodlines. They confuse our warriors." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a snarl that only the audio pickups would catch. "Your love is a threat, Sarah Vex." It was a ridiculous accusation. It was madness. But as Sarah looked at the crowd, she saw them nodding. They wanted a villain, and Draven had given them two, the foreign monster and the traitorous woman who shielded him. "Arrest him," Draven ordered. "Protocol 77 Alpha," Sarah shouted, her hand going to her staff hilt. "I invoke the right of custody. If you shoot him, you are declaring war on the Terran Coalition without Senate approval. You will be executed for treason." General Draven paused. He knew the law. He could kill Marcus, but he couldn't kill the diplomatic immunity without a trial. Not yet. Not while the Senate still functioned. "Fine," Draven spat. "Take the filth to the tribunal vault. Place him under maximum confinement. We will review the truth in 7 cycles." "I want access," Sarah said. "Denied," Draven said. "You are a witness. Step aside or join him in chains." 2 troopers grabbed Marcus by the arms. They hauled him backward. "Try!" Marcus yelled. Sarah reached out. It was a desperate, reflexive motion. Her hand caught his wrist. Skin touched skin. It shouldn't have happened. Veyron physiology was dense, high energy. Humans were low voltage. But when her fingers closed around his wrist, a shockwave tore through her nervous system. It wasn't just the heat of his truth. It was a resonance spike so loud it eclipsed the screaming crowd. It felt like 2 musical notes separated by light years, suddenly snapping into perfect harmony. Her heart hammered against her ribs, syncing with his for a split second. The universe seemed to narrow down to the point of contact. She felt his terror, his resolve, in a strange, bewildering pull that terrified her more than the bomb. The troopers ripped him away. The connection broke with a physical snap that left Sarah's hand tingling. She stood alone in the dust as they dragged him toward the armored transport. Draven gave her one last look of contempt before turning to address the cameras. Sarah turned on her heel and marched toward the palace. She needed to get off the street. She needed to think. Her quarters were high in the spire, usually a sanctuary of silence and light. Now they felt like a cage. Sarah stripped off her gauntlets and threw them onto the table. She activated her personal console. Computer, access security grid sector 4, raw feed, time frame minus 10 minutes. The holographic interface flickered red. Access denied, security clearance revoked. Sarah froze. Override, authorization Vex Alpha 1. Authorization invalid, user designation suspended. She tried her communications array. She tried to hail the magistrate. She tried to call her own father in the Senate. Connection blocked. Cold realization settled in her stomach. It tasted like old copper. This wasn't just a frame-up. It was a coup. They had isolated her. They wanted her blind, deaf, and obedient. Draven didn't just want a war with the humans. He wanted to purge the internal opposition. And by standing with Marcus, she had painted a target on her own back. She paced the room. She was a reader. She was a warrior. She was not a victim. If she couldn't use the official channels, she would use the gutter. Sarah went to her wardrobe and pulled out a cloak made of shimmer silk, the kind used by high-end escorts to mask their identity. She pulled the hood up. She reached under her bed and pulled out a small, antiquated device, a subwave transmitter she had confiscated from a smuggler years ago. She keyed in a frequency that didn't appear on any official registry. "Cade," she whispered. "Pick up, you bottom-feeding parasite." Static hissed. Then a voice, smooth as oil and sharp as a scalpel, filtered through. Well, if it isn't her radiant, high and mighty," the voice drawled. "I saw the news. Sarah, you have terrible taste in boyfriends. He explodes on the first date. Tacky." It wasn't him, Cade. Of course it wasn't. The footage was too clean. The shadows were wrong on the gravity disk. "I need proof," Sarah said. "I'm locked out of the grid. I know they put a hard lock on your biometrics. You're toxic property, darling. But I might have snagged a packet of metadata before Draven's firewall slammed down. It'll cost you." "Name it." "The codes to the magistrate's wine cellar." "Done. Sending it now." The data packet hit her portable slate. Sarah scanned the lines of code. It was technical, dense stuff, but one line stood out. It was a timestamp from the security camera file header. The creation date of the file, labeled Assassin Evidence Primary, was dated 3 hours before the explosion occurred. Sarah stared at the numbers. They hadn't just edited the footage in real time. They had pre-rendered the sequence. They knew exactly where Marcus would be standing because they had orchestrated the courier to lead him there. It was a play, and Marcus was the prop. She grabbed her staff and clipped it beneath her cloak. 7 cycles, Draven had said. 7 cycles until the review. But if they had gone to this much trouble, Marcus wouldn't survive the night. He would have an accident in his cell or a suicide born of guilt. She had to move. The tribunal vault was deep underground, a stark contrast to the crystal spires above. It was a place of black stone and humming energy fields. Marcus sat on the narrow bench in his cell. The front wall was a shimmering curtain of violet energy that buzzed angrily if he got too close. A guard drone hovered outside, its red eye fixed on him. "You know," Marcus said to the drone, his voice echoing in the empty block, "in my culture, we usually give the prisoner a phone call, or at least a sandwich. I'm hypoglycemic. If I pass out, I can't properly appreciate my impending execution." The drone did not respond. Marcus leaned his head back against the cold stone. His hands were shaking. He clasped them together to stop it. He was terrified. He had seen the way the crowd looked at him. He was thousands of light years from home, trapped in a society that viewed him as a virus. But more than the fear, he felt the memory of Sarah's hand on his wrist, that electric jolt. He had felt it too. It was impossible. He was human. She was Veyron. Their biology wasn't compatible, but for that second it had felt like plugging into a reactor. She's going to get herself killed, Marcus whispered to the darkness. Idiot. He closed his eyes. Don't come for me, Sarah. Just stay away. A soft thrumming sound echoed down the corridor, the sound of a heavy door sliding open, then closing. The guard drone spun around. Identify. Diplomatic override Gamma 6, a voice said, low, calm, and dangerous. Sarah stepped out of the shadows. She had lowered her hood. In the gloom of the dungeon, her eyes seemed to glow with their own inner light. Override rejected, the drone stated. Prisoner is restricted. Saray moved with a blur of speed. She didn't draw her weapon. She simply reached out, grabbed the drone by its sensory cluster, and drove her fingers into the casing. There was a crackle of electricity, a spark, and the drone dropped to the floor. Dead. Marcus jumped up from the bench. Sarah, are you insane? Sarah stepped up to the energy barrier. The violet light cast harsh shadows on her face. She looked tired, but her jaw was set in a line of granite. Probably. You need to leave, Marcus said, moving close to the bars, though the heat coming off them stung his face. Draven is framing me. He'll frame you too. He already has. Sarah pulled her slate from her cloak and held it up. I found the timestamp. The footage was prepared in advance, Marcus. This goes all the way to the top. Marcus looked at the data. A grim smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. So I was the guest of honor at a scripted party. Yes. Sarah deactivated the slate and looked at him. Her resonance reached out, testing the air between them. Even through the energy shield, she could feel him. The warmth, the fear, the truth. They want to use you to start a war, Sarah said softly. They want to use us to prove that love is weakness. We're not in love, Marcus said. We met this morning. I accidentally propositioned you. It was hardly a romance for the ages. I know, Sarah said. She leaned closer until her nose was inches from the lethal energy field. But they have made it one. They have written our story for us. She looked deep into his eyes. I'm going to rewrite it. Sarah, Marcus warned, don't do this. Walk away. Survive. I cannot walk away, Sarah said. I am a reader. I live by truth. And the truth is, you are innocent. She placed her hand on the energy field control panel on the wall. It was locked, but she had tools for that. Not yet. She couldn't break him out yet. The alarm would bring the entire army down on them before they reached the lift. She needed a plan. She needed leverage. I can't open this tonight, she said, not without tripping the silent alarms. Good, Marcus said. Get out of here. I will be back, Sarah vowed. I'm going to get you out, Marcus. I'm going to find the original footage. I'm going to shove it down Draven's throat on a planetary broadcast. Why, Marcus asked. Why risk everything for a stranger? Sarah hesitated. The only thing in this city that doesn't taste like metal. She pulled her hood back up. Stay alive, Marcus Thorne. I'm coming for you. She vanished into the shadows of the corridor, leaving Marcus alone with the dead drone and the humming silence, holding on to a promise that felt as dangerous as the bomb that had brought him there. The heavy blast doors of the tribunal vault groaned as they slid apart, the sound like stone grinding against bone. Sarah Vex stood in the corridor, her spine rigid, holding a scroll of vellum that was older than the current government. The warder, a hulking Veyron with cybernetic optics, read the document again. He looked annoyed. A resonant truth walk, the warder grunted, handing the scroll back. Nobody has invoked this statute in 400 years, diplomat. It is archaic superstition. It is the law, Sarah said, her voice cool and sharp as cut glass. The suspect is entitled to prove his emotional continuity at the scene of the alleged crime before formal sentencing, unless you are suggesting that General Draven's military authority supersedes the founding scrolls. The warder hesitated. To deny the scrolls was heresy. To defy Draven was suicide. But Sarah was standing there in full ceremonial regalia, the golden white of the diplomatic corps, looking like an avenging angel. Bureaucracy, as always, favored the one with the paperwork. You have 1 hour, the warder spat. If he tries to run, the collar detonates. He gestured to the cell. Marcus Thorne walked out. He looked worse than when Sarah had left him. There was a bruise blooming on his jaw, and he was wearing a heavy suppression collar that blinked a menacing red against his throat. But when he saw Sarah, his shoulders dropped an inch, the tension bleeding out. "I thought you were a hallucination," Marcus said. "I am your legal counsel," Sarah corrected. She didn't look at him directly. She couldn't afford to let the cameras see her relief. "We are going for a walk." "A walk?" Marcus asked, falling into step beside her as two armed drones flanked them. "Is there going to be a picnic? Maybe some light treason?" "Keep your head down," Sarah murmured, "and do not speak unless I tell you to." They exited the detention block and emerged into the blinding glare of the twin suns. The transition from the silence of the vault to the roar of the city was physical. The moment they stepped onto the public concourse, the atmosphere turned poisonous. The news of the assassination had spread like wildfire. The gleaming white towers of New Cascadia were plastered with holographic projections. They looped the doctored footage of Marcus throwing the bomb over and over again. Beneath his face, burning in letters 10 feet tall, was the Veyron word: Carrick, traitor, filth, plague bringer. A low hiss started from the pedestrians nearby. It grew into a rumble. "There he is," someone screamed. "Murderer! Plague bringer!" A woman in the intricate robes of a merchant lunged forward, pursing her lips. She spat a mouthful of gray powder at Marcus. It was ritual dust, crushed bone and ash used to mark the dead and the damned. The dust struck Marcus's shoulder, clouding the air. He flinched but didn't stop. Sarah's jaw tightened until her teeth ached. Her resonance was screaming. The hatred of the crowd hit her like radiant heat, a suffocating wall of anger and fear. They didn't just hate Marcus. They were terrified of him, and that fear had been weaponized into rage. She wanted to draw her weapon. She wanted to scream that they were being lied to, but she kept walking, her face a mask of stone. "Keep moving," she ordered, her voice cutting through the noise. "Friendly locals," Marcus muttered, wiping the ash from his sleeve. "I assume the gift shop is sold out of 'I survived the mob' t-shirts." He was trying to joke, but Sarah could feel the tremor in his voice. He was scared. He had every right to be. They reached a security checkpoint. A young Veyron guard stepped in their path, his hand on his stun baton. He looked nervous, his eyes darting between Sarah's rank insignia and the mob behind them. Marcus, attempting to diffuse the tension, gave a small, polite bow. He tapped his translator. "Good cycle to you, officer," Marcus said carefully. "May your grandmother's garden grow lush and thick." The guard froze. The crowd went dead silent. Sarah stopped, closing her eyes for a brief, painful second. "What?" the guard whispered, his hand tightening on his weapon. "Marcus!" Sarah hissed. "What?" Marcus whispered back, confused. "I memorized the greeting. Grandmother's garden, lush and thick." "You used the word for beard, not garden," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "And you used the adjective for erotic. You just told him you hope his grandmother's facial hair is sexually potent." Marcus stared at the guard, his face flushing crimson. "Oh, great," Marcus muttered, looking at his boots. "Even my apologies are illegal here." Sarah stepped forward, radiating authority. "The prisoner is mentally deficient due to shock. Step aside, guardsman." The guard, too confused to be angry, stepped back. They pushed through the checkpoint and finally reached the blast site. The crater was still cordoned off, a black scar on the pristine white plaza. The air here tasted of ozone and burnt stone. The silence was heavy, a vacuum where the vacuum bloom had eaten the sound. "Why are we here, Sarah?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping. "The Truth Walk is not just a legal formality," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the devastation. "It is a forensic technique. Strong emotions leave a residue in the psychic field. Like heat on stone. I need to know what happened here." She closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, ignoring the physical world, tuning into the harmonic frequencies of the past. The blast site was a cacophony. She felt the screams of the dying, sharp, jagged spikes of red panic. She felt the sorrow of the survivors, a low blue thrum that lingered like fog. "Talk to me," Sarah commanded. "Walk me through what you did. Exactly." "I was running," Marcus said, pacing the edge of the crater. "I saw the courier. He was right there by that broken pillar." Sarah focused on the spot. She felt it, a jagged, frantic scribble of noise. That was Marcus. Terror, confusion, the desperate need to save lives. It matched his current emotional signature perfectly. I tackled him, Marcus continued. He dropped the case. I saw the timer. Sarah scanned the area where the courier had been. She searched for the courier's fear, his anger, his fanaticism. She found nothing, or rather, she found a hole where the courier should have been. There was a patch of emotional silence. It was smooth, cold, and artificial. It wasn't the absence of emotion. It was the presence of a suppressing agent, a disciplined, rehearsed emptiness. There are two signatures, Sarah whispered, her eyes snapping open. Yours is chaotic, real. The other one, she paused, her voice dropping. It is flat, clinical. The courier? Marcus asked. He was not a fanatic, Sarah said, the realization chilling her blood. Fanatics burn bright. This man was cold. He was a professional. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his mind until he felt nothing. It was a job. So you believe me? I believed you before, Sarah said quietly. Now I can prove it. A warning chime sounded in her helmet comm. Sarah, look out, Marcus shouted. 3 shadows dropped from the upper gantries. They landed in a triangle formation around them. They were clad in matte gray armor, faceless helms, and carried staves that crackled with high-voltage electricity. Purity wardens. Draven's private enforcement squad. Diplomat Vex, the leader's voice distorted through his helmet speakers. The prisoner is attempting to escape. Lethal force is authorized. He is standing still, Sarah yelled, her hand flashing to the hilt of her collapsible cortosis staff. Stand down. Target locked, the warden said. They didn't want custody. With a metallic crack. She deflected the strike, her staff snapping open with a metallic crack. She deflected the blow upward, spun inside the warden's guard, and drove the blunt end of her weapon into his solar plexus. The warden gasped, his armor dampening the blow, but not the momentum. Sarah swept his legs, sending him crashing to the pavement. Run, she shouted to Marcus. I can't outrun them, Marcus yelled. The other 2 wardens were closing in, their movements synchronized and fast. Sarah engaged the second attacker. She fought with the elegant brutality of her caste, redirecting force, using their weight against them. She ducked a swing that would have taken her head off, grabbed the warden's arm, and used her thruster boots to flip over him, twisting his wrist until the joint popped. But the third warden had bypassed her. He was charging Marcus, weapon raised. Marcus scrambled back, tripping over a piece of rubble. He frantically tapped at his wrist comp. Come on, Marcus muttered. The warden raised the staff for a killing blow. Marcus swiped his screen. A nearby construction spotlight, a massive industrial unit meant to illuminate the repairs, suddenly swiveled with a mechanical shriek. It aimed directly at the warden's helmet and flashed to maximum strobe intensity. The warden staggered, blinded by the sudden assault of 10,000 lumens. Eat photons, Marcus yelled. He rolled away, grabbed a loose conduit cable hanging from a severed pylon, and jammed it into a puddle of water at the warden's feet. Sparks showered the air. The warden seized up as the current from the city grid shorted his armor's servos. He froze in place, a statue of locked gears. Sarah finished her opponent with a precise strike to the helmet sensor array, blinding him. She rushed to Marcus's side. Not bad for an analyst, she breathed, her chest heaving. I also make excellent spreadsheets, Marcus panted. Can we go now? The upper levels are compromised, Sarah said, looking at the approaching sirens in the sky. We have to go down. She grabbed his arm and dragged him toward a service vent. She kicked the grate open. Ladies first, Marcus said. Move, she ordered, and shoved him into the dark. The underlayers of New Cascadia were a different world. If the surface was a monument to crystalline purity, the undercity was a celebration of biological chaos. They descended on a rusted gravity rail, the air getting thicker, hotter, and wetter with every mile. When they finally stepped off onto the rusted platform of Sector 9, Marcus stared in wonder. The walls were alive. Massive bioengineered vines pulsed with a soft bioluminescent blue light, acting as both structural support and street lamps. The canals that ran through the center of the market smelled of algae and spice. The people here were a mix of species, Veyron outcasts, scaly reptilian traders, and cybernetic drifters. It's humid, Marcus noted, wiping sweat from his forehead. The Dominion hides its roots, Sarah said, pulling her cloak tight to hide her gleaming armor. The city has grown, Marcus. The crystals above are calcified plants. Down here, the roots still feed. They moved through a market selling memory silk and illegal star maps. The crowd ignored them. Anonymity was the only currency that mattered here. Hey, you two look like you just robbed a bank and failed. A figure leaned against a stall selling fried grubs. He was a Veyron, but short, scrawny, and missing half of one ear. He wore a jacket covered in conflicting political patches. Cade, Sarah said, relief washing over her. Your radiant stab highness, Cade said, giving a mock bow that was mostly a slouch. He looked at Marcus. And you must be the soft-skinned problem. I saw your face on the screens. You have a very symmetrical nose. It will look terrible when they cut it off. Charmed, Marcus said. Sarah said you were funny. She didn't mention the smell. Cade grinned, revealing sharpened teeth. That's the smell of freedom, human, and rancid oil. Mostly oil. Follow me unless you want to sign autographs for the bounty hunters. Cade led them through a maze of twisting alleyways, ducking under dripping pipes and stepping over sleeping drunks. He brought them to a secluded alcove behind a massive throbbing root cluster. All right, Cade said, pulling a data pad from his boot. I scrubbed the trace on the file you sent, Sarah, but you need to see this. He handed the pad to Marcus. Look at the compression artifacting, Cade said, pointing a clawed finger at the screen. Marcus squinted at the code scrolling. He was an analyst. Patterns were his language. Here, Marcus said, his eyes widening, the pixel bleed on the edges of the explosion. It's hexagonal. So, Sarah asked. Commercial editing software uses square compression, Marcus explained, his voice gaining speed. Civilian security AI uses triangular. Hexagonal compression is proprietary. It's high-density encryption meant for deep space transmission. He looked up at Sarah, his face grave. This wasn't edited by a news station or a rogue hacker. This footage uses the Imperial Military Codec. The only people who have access to this algorithm are the High Command. Draven, Sarah whispered. He didn't just frame you, Marcus said. He used the Dominion's own war servers to render the fake video. He signed his name on the murder weapon, digitally speaking. But we can't prove it without the source file, Cade said, taking a bite of a grub he had produced from his pocket. And that file is locked in a databank that probably has more guns than my mother's wedding. Where is the source? Sarah asked. Project Thresher, Cade said. That's the tag attached to the file header. It's an old operation, deep black ops, shut down 3 years ago and archived. Thresher? Sarah frowned. I know that name. It's associated with the old shrine in the Hollows, the one they sealed off after the Unification Wars. A shrine? Marcus asked. I thought you guys were post-religion. We are, Sarah said. That is why it is the perfect place to hide a server. No one goes there. It is considered spiritually radioactive. Sounds cozy, Marcus said. Let's go. The Shrine of the Weeping Sun was a cavernous space carved directly into the bedrock of the planet. The walls here didn't just pulse, they hummed. A low, resonant vibration that rattled the teeth and made the hairs on Sarah's arms stand up. It was dark, lit only by the faint dying glow of ancient phosphorescent moss. Cade, stay at the entrance, Sarah commanded. Watch for tails. With pleasure, Cade said. I'm allergic to holy places. Makes me break out in morality. Sarah and Marcus descended the stone steps into the sanctum. The air was thick with resonance. It was like walking into a storm of static electricity. This place, Marcus whispered, rubbing his chest. I can feel it. Is that normal? The stone here amplifies emotion, Sarah said, her voice tight. It was built to act as a psychic amplifier for the ancient readers. It makes everything louder. Fear, anger. What about, Marcus started, then stopped. He looked at her in the dim light, the hum of the walls wrapping around them. Sarah felt her control slipping. The barrier she usually kept between her mind and the world was eroding. She could feel Marcus, not just his fear now, but his admiration. He was looking at her, at the way the light caught the curve of her armor, at the determination in her eyes. He was awestruck, and beneath that, a deep, pulling hunger. Sarah, he said softly. The sound of her name on his lips sent a flare through her resonance that was so bright it almost blinded her. It wasn't just sound, it was a physical sensation, a caress along her nervous system. She stumbled, grabbing his jacket collar to steady herself. Careful, she breathed. Are you okay? Marcus froze, his hands hovering near her waist, wanting to touch her, but terrified of crossing the line. The air between them crackled. The ancient walls hummed louder, feeding on the feedback loop of their attraction. You are too loud, Sarah whispered, staring at his mouth. Your feelings, they are shouting. I can't help it, Marcus said, his voice rough. I'm standing next to the most terrifying, incredible woman I've ever met, and we're probably going to die in a basement. It clarifies things. Sarah looked at him. She saw the dust on his face, the bruise on his jaw, the human fragility of him, and she saw the strength that kept him standing. She wanted to kiss him. The impulse was a roar in her blood. She leaned in, her eyes fluttering shut. Then she stopped. She pulled back, her chest heaving, her hands trembling on his lapels. We cannot, she said, her voice breaking. Not here, not now. In the Dominion, desire is a weapon, Marcus. If I let this happen, if I let myself need you, Draven will use it. He will tear you apart to break me. Marcus looked at her, his eyes dark and serious. He didn't try to close the gap. He respected the distance she put between them. Pretending we don't feel anything is just another way of letting them win, Marcus said quietly. It's a surrender. Sarah, Draven wants you to be a machine. Are you? Sarah stared at him. No. Good, Marcus said. Then let's survive this, so we can figure out what this is when I'm not wearing an explosive collar. Sarah nodded slowly, releasing his jacket. She took a deep breath, recentering her mind, forcing the resonance back into a manageable hum. The data node, she said, turning away to hide the flush on her cheeks. It should be behind the altar. They moved to the back of the shrine. There, embedded in the rock, was a metallic pillar covered in dust. A console flickered with faint amber light. It's an oath lock, Sarah said, examining the interface. Old tech. It doesn't use passwords. It uses biometric harmonics. Meaning? It requires a resonant signature to activate, Sarah said. She placed her hand on the panel. The amber light turned blue. Resonant signature detected. Authorization incomplete. Secondary biometric required. Living heartbeat. It needs a witness, Sarah realized. The old laws required two people to seal an oath. One to speak it, one to witness it. It needs a separate living rhythm to sync with the resonance. Will I work? Marcus asked. I'm not Veyron. The machine checks for life, not species, Sarah said. Put your hand on the panel next to mine. Marcus stepped up. He placed his hand on the cold metal surface, his fingers brushing against hers. Focus on your heartbeat, Sarah instructed. Don't be afraid. Just be. Marcus closed his eyes. Sarah focused. She pushed her energy into the machine. A stream of golden mental light. She felt the machine wake up, sensing her. Then it reached out for Marcus. She felt his heartbeat through the machine. Thump, 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 thump. It was steady, strong, undeniably alive. The machine's hum deepened. The blue light began to spread, crawling up Sarah's arm, then jumping the gap to Marcus's hand. He gasped as the energy flowed into him, a warm, tingling circuit completing itself. Their pulses synced, thump, 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 thump. It was a rhythm that shook the floor. Heat radiated from their skin, a golden glow that lit up the dark room. It was terrifying and beautiful. It was the dual key turning in the lock. Sarah trembled, a tear slipping from her closed eye. She felt his desire, not a hunger to take, but a desperate need to give, to protect, to stand beside her. Marcus, she breathed, her voice echoing in his mind as well as his ears. They pulled back just an inch, breaking the neural bridge but leaving the physical connection. They were both gasping, their eyes wide, pupils blown. Lock disengaged. The heavy metal casing of the pillar slid open with a hiss of pressurized air. A single data crystal sat inside, pulsing with a dark red light. Sarah grabbed it. She jammed it into her slate. Project Thresher, she read aloud. Deployment of atmospheric destabilization agents, human containment protocols, false flag operations. Her eyes widened. It's all here. The blueprints for the ball, the order to edit the footage, Draven's personal seal. We got him, Marcus grinned. Suddenly, the shrine was bathed in a rotating crimson light. A siren began to wail, echoing off the cavern walls with deafening volume. "You triggered a silent alarm," Marcus yelled over the noise. "The oath lock," Sarah shouted. "It notifies the archives when a sealed file is opened. Draven knows. He knows we're here." "How long until they get here?" Sarah looked at the ceiling, where dust was beginning to fall, as heavy engines rumbled far above. "They are already here." She grabbed Marcus's hand, interlacing her fingers with his. "Run." The data crystal pulsed with a frantic, dying red light as Sarah shoved it into the terminal of Cade's mobile safe house, a repurposed sanitation hauler that smelled faintly of ozone and industrial lemon cleaner. The holographic emitter sputtered to life, throwing jagged fragments of text and video into the cramped air of the cabin. Sarah, Marcus, and Cade huddled around the projection, their faces illuminated by the ghostly blue glow of Dominion secrets. "Project Thresher," Sarah read, her voice tight. "It is not just a defense protocol. It is a blueprint for a coup." The scrolling data was a nightmare of bureaucratic precision. It listed detailed schematics for the vacuum bloom explosives, deployment schedules for purity wardens in civilian sectors, and, most damning of all, a projection model titled Wormhole Corridor Seizure. The plan was simple and monstrous. Frame the Terran coalition for a terror attack, use the resulting panic to declare martial law, and seize the strategic trade routes that connected the Dominion to the wider galaxy. "Look at the target list," Marcus said, pointing to a column of names. "Peace Chancellor Vorian was just the opening move," Sarah whispered. "They have flagged half the Senate for preventative detention. This is a purge." "It's proof," Sarah said, the warmth of the truth burning in her chest like a fever. "We have them. We take this to the High Tribunal, and Draven is finished." Suddenly, the hologram flickered violently. The text began to dissolve, the letters unspooling into meaningless static. "What is happening?" Sarah demanded. Cade's claws flew across his keyboard. "It's a kill switch. The file has a self-erasing cipher. Someone anticipated theft. It's eating the data from the inside out." "Stop it," Marcus yelled. "I can't stop it. I can only slow it down," Cade snarled. "It's military-grade rot code." Within 20 seconds, the detailed schematics were gone. The list of names vanished. All that remained were fragments, broken headers, a few seconds of corrupted video, and the undeniable digital signature of the Imperial War Office. The red light on the crystal died. The file was gone. Sarah slammed her fist onto the metal table, denting it. "We lost it. We lost the smoking gun." "We have fragments," Marcus said, his mind already racing, calculating odds. "We have the file headers, the timestamp anomalies. It's circumstantial, but it's enough to raise reasonable doubt." "Reasonable doubt doesn't stop a firing squad in New Cascadia," Cade muttered, tossing a handful of nuts into his mouth. "You need a miracle, or a very fast ship." "We are not running," Sarah said. She turned to the small viewport, staring out at the distant, glittering needle of the orbital Senate spire that pierced the upper atmosphere. "Tonight is the Gala of the Ascendant. The entire High Council will be there. The tribunal judges, the foreign dignitaries, everyone." Marcus's gaze found hers, and he saw the dangerous tilt of her jaw. "Sarah, no. If we can breach the spire and jack directly into the broadcast node in the Grand Hall," Sarah continued, "we can push the fragments to every screen on the planet. We don't need a conviction. We just need to break Draven's narrative. We need the people to see the cracks." "The spire is the most secure fortress in the sector," Marcus argued, "and we are the most wanted people on the planet. Walking in there is suicide." "Walking in as fugitives is suicide," Sarah corrected. She looked at Cade. "Walking in as guests is merely insane. Cade, tell me you still have those invite codes from the magistrate you blackmailed last winter." Cade sighed, a long rattling sound. "I was saving those for a rainy day." "This is not rain, Sarah. This is a hurricane." "Do it," Sarah commanded. But the infiltration plan fell apart before it even began. The invite codes were flagged. The moment they tried to upload the credentials, alarms screamed across the Spire security network. They were recognized, trapped. Sarah stood in the narrow corridor of the undercity maintenance tunnel, listening to the sound of boots approaching from both ends. Marcus was beside her, his face grim. "We're boxed in," Marcus said. Sarah pulled an ancient scroll from her cloak, the one she'd been carrying since the truth walk. She looked at it, and a different plan crystallized in her mind, a darker plan. "There's another way," Sarah said quietly, "an older way." She unrolled the scroll, her fingers tracing the archaic text. "The thousand blades," she read. "If a citizen believes the court is corrupt, they may demand judgment by combat, not a duel, a siege. The accuser must fight 1,000 sanctioned warriors in the arena of vows. If they survive, if they are the last standing, they earn a single demand, one truth spoken publicly under unbreakable oath, and the regime cannot refuse it." Marcus stared at her. 1,000 warriors? Sarah, that's not a trial. That's an execution. "It's a chance," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "It's the only one we have left. Draven wants to use violence to silence the truth. Fine, I'll speak his language." She looked at Marcus, her golden eyes blazing. "I'm going to challenge the Dominion, and I'm going to win." The plaza of the Ascendant was empty, save for the wind whistling through the crystal spires. The twin suns were high, beating down on the white stone. Sarah Vex walked into the center of the square. Marcus walked beside her, his hands raised in surrender. The security drones descended instantly. Red lasers dotted their chests. "Halt!" a voice boomed from the perimeter speakers. "You are identified as fugitives. Surrender or be terminated." Sarah didn't stop until she was standing on the Great Seal of the Dominion, a massive mosaic of the founders inlaid in the plaza floor. She slammed the butt of her staff against the stone. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "I, Sarah Vex, diplomat of the High Spire, daughter of House Vex," she screamed, her voice amplified by her armored speakers. "Invoke the old law." Troopers poured out of the palace gates surrounding them, hundreds of them. "I demand the right of blood," Sarah shouted, pointing her staff at the Senate spire. "I demand the 1,000 blades." The troopers hesitated. The officers froze. The cameras on the drones were broadcasting live. To interrupt the invocation was a sacrilege. "My demand is simple," Sarah roared. "The exoneration of Marcus Thorne and the truth of Project Thresher." General Draven appeared on the balcony of the palace, looking down at them like a god on a cloud. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white. He wanted to order the fire. He wanted to turn them into ash. But the city was watching. The army was watching. If he killed a high-caste diplomat invoking the sacred law, he would look like a tyrant, not a savior. Draven smiled, a cruel, thin smile. "Accepted," Draven's voice boomed across the plaza. He gestured to the guards. "Secure the prize." The guards moved in on Marcus. They grabbed him roughly, pulling his arms behind his back. They slapped magnetic cuffs on his wrists. Sarah didn't move. She stood rigid, staring straight ahead, tears of rage burning in her eyes but refusing to fall. "I'll see you at the finish line," Marcus called out as they dragged him away. He didn't struggle. He held his head high, looking every bit the defiant anomaly he was. "Open the arena," Draven commanded. The Arena of Vows was a coliseum of black metal, capable of seating 100,000. Today it was full. The noise was a physical wall of sound, cheering, jeering, the stomp of feet like thunder rolling across stone. At the far end, in a suspended glass cage that hung over the center of the fighting pit, Marcus stood. He pressed his palm against the glass. He was the only silent thing in the world. Below him, the massive gates ground open. The darkness of the tunnel swallowed the light. Sarah Vex walked out. She was alone, one woman against an empire. Across the sand, the opposing gates opened. The first wave emerged, 50 soldiers. They were not drones. They were elite shock troopers, clad in heavy armor, wielding shock mauls and Varoro blades. They ignited their weapons in unison, a hum of lethal energy that made the air vibrate. Sarah spun her staff. She looked up at the glass cage. She couldn't see Marcus's face clearly from this distance, but she could feel him. A single bright star in the black sky of her mind. Thump, thump. She took a breath. "Come and get it," she whispered. She charged. The sand of the Arena of Vows was white, crushed quartz that glittered under the harsh twin suns. By the 20th minute, it was stained with shimmering blue fluid. Saravex moved through the chaos like a storm front. The first wave of 50 warriors had been a blunt instrument, brute force intended to crush her quickly. She had turned their aggression against them, weaving through their heavy swings, using her cortosis staff to trip, shatter, and disarm. Now the Dominion was getting creative. The gates rumbled open for the second wave. These were not soldiers. They were blade dancers from the Iceland moons, 6 of them, moving with a fluid insectoid grace. They wore light armor and carried dual energy whips that snapped with the sound of cracking thunder. They circled her, their movements synchronized by a neural link. Sarah stood in the center, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She gripped her staff, her knuckles white. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, engaging her resonance. She felt them, a hive mind, a singular buzzing intent to dissect her. The first whip cracked, aiming for her throat. Sarah ducked, the heat singing the air above her head. She didn't counterattack. She waited. The dancers spun, a kaleidoscope of lethal light. They relied on perfect rhythm. Sarah gathered a ball of psychic pressure in her chest, her own fear, her rage, her exhaustion, and pushed it outward in a screaming pulse. It wasn't a physical attack. It was an emotional dissonant chord. The dancers stumbled, their neural link fractured under the sudden spike of foreign panic. One dancer missed a step, his whip crossing the path of another. The rhythm broke. Sarah lunged. She vaulted off the stumbling dancer's knee, swinging her staff in a wide arc. The impact against their helmets rang like a bell. 1 down, 2 down. She fought not with hatred, but with a surgeon's precision. Every strike was calculated to incapacitate, not kill. To kill would be to give Draven the monster he wanted. She would not be a monster, she was a diplomat. Above the arena, in the suspended glass cage, Marcus pressed his hands against the console Kate had remotely unlocked. "She's moving too fast," Marcus muttered, his eyes darting across the scrolling data streams. "Her metabolic rate is redlining. She's burning through her energy reserves." "She is fighting for you, soft skin." Cade's voice crackled through the comms. "Try to be worth it." "I have isolated the broadcast node." "Are you in?" "I'm in," Marcus said, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "I'm tracing the source of the assassination order." Draven covered his tracks well, but he left a ghost image in the kernel. "Hurry," Cade hissed. "The third wave is coming, and this one looks heavy." On the sands, the ground shook. The gravity shifters emerged. 3 massive champions wearing exosuits fitted with localized gravity generators. They didn't walk. They fell forward, manipulating the gravitational constant to launch themselves at impossible speeds. The lead shifter slammed his fist into the ground. A shockwave of distorted gravity hit Sarah, sending her flying backward. She crashed into the arena wall, the stone cracking behind her. Pain exploded in her spine. She tasted metal. The shifter charged, effectively weighing 3 tons. Sarah couldn't block that. If she tried, her bones would turn to dust. She looked at the ground. The arena floor was segmented, hiding the mechanisms for terrain changes. "Computer!" Marcus's voice shouted in her earpiece, bypassing the arena jammer. "Sector 4 plate is loose. The hydraulics are damaged." Sarah didn't question him. She rolled to the left, diving away just as the shifter's fist demolished the wall where she had been. She scrambled towards Sector 4. The shifter turned, roaring, and activated his gravity well to pull her back. Sarah jammed her staff into the seam of the floor plate and triggered the explosive release she had scavenged from a fallen soldier in Wave 1. The plate blew upward. The shifter, heavy with his own gravity field, couldn't adjust. He tripped on the jutting metal. His momentum carried him forward, face first into the exposed hydraulic piston. The impact was deafening. The suit's generator whined and died. Sarah stood up, shaking the dust from her hair. She looked up at the glass cage. Marcus was there, a silhouette against the glare, fighting his own war on a holographic keyboard. "Nice catch," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "Wave 4 is weird." A single warrior stepped out. He was clad in archaic, gilded armor covered in purity scrolls. He raised a hand, stopping the other fighters. "I am Valerius the Pure," the warrior bellowed, his voice amplified to the nosebleed seats. I have studied the blade for 40 years. I have meditated on the mountaintops of Kor. I am the vessel of... You are the vessel of a lengthy preamble, Sarah interrupted, her voice booming over the arena speakers. The warrior froze. What? Your stance, Sarah called out, leaning on her staff like she was bored. It is very dramatic, but your left foot is dragging. Is that an old injury or just a lack of commitment? The crowd tittered. The warrior flushed purple. I will silence your insolence, he screamed, abandoning his scripted speech and charging in a blind rage. He was sloppy. He was angry. Sarah stepped aside, hooked his ankle with her staff, and watched him faceplant into the sand. Lesson 1 of diplomacy, Sarah said to his unconscious form, never let them see you sweat, and never monologue. High in the VIP box, General Draven stood alone, watching the spectacle. His hands gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. Behind him on the plush carpet lay Magistrate Vior's corpse, already cold. Draven had shot him hours ago, the moment the old fool had questioned the plan. Collateral damage. She is making a mockery of everything, Draven muttered to himself. He pressed a button on his wrist. Initiate Protocol 0. Deploy the assassins. The waves intensified. The warriors were no longer wearing the ceremonial colors of the dueling guilds. They were clad in matte black stealth suits. They didn't bow. They didn't announce their names. They struck from the shadows, using cloaking fields and poison blades. Warning, Cade's voice broke in. Bioscan detects neurotoxin on those daggers. That is illegal in 3 systems. They are not duelists, Sarah said, dodging a poison knife that would have stopped her heart. They are assassins. Draven is cheating, Marcus said, his voice hard. Then so do we, Cade said. High above the arena, a judge drone, a massive hovering sphere meant to enforce the rules, suddenly twitched. Its blue ocular light turned a chaotic green. Cade had seized the controls. Attention, citizens! Cade's voice boomed from the drone, distorted and loud. Please observe the playback. The drone projected a massive hologram into the air. It showed a slow-motion scan of the current attackers. It highlighted the poison reservoirs in their weapons. It highlighted the illegal reflex boosters in their spines. These are not sanctioned warriors, Cade shouted. These are liquidation assets. Is the Dominion so weak it must cheat to kill one woman? The crowd murmured. Vayrons were a martial people. They tolerated cruelty, but they despised cowardice. Cheat, someone shouted. Honor the law, another voice cried. The mood in the arena shifted. The wall of hate began to fracture. They weren't cheering for Sarah yet, but they were jeering Draven. Sarah used the distraction. She smashed the cloaking generator on the lead assassin's belt. He flickered into visibility, looking panicked. She swept his legs and knocked him unconscious. I demand the final challenge, Sarah screamed at the VIP box. Send him out. Stop hiding behind your murderers. Draven's face twisted with rage. He pressed another button on his wrist. Deploy the Void Sentinel, Draven ordered. The great gates at the far end of the arena groaned. They didn't just open, they seemed to be torn apart. A figure emerged. It was 7 feet tall, encased in armor made of a material that drank the light. It was blacker than black, a hole in reality. Sarah gasped. Her resonance recoiled. Usually every living thing had a song, a hum of emotion. This thing had nothing. It was a silence so profound it made her ears ring. It radiated a cold, dampening field that smothered her empathy like a wet blanket. What is that? Marcus asked, his voice trembling. Void Sentinel, Sarah whispered. Ancient tech. It dampens resonance. It feeds on fear. It is the anti-truth. The champion walked forward. It carried a massive greatsword that hummed with a dark violet energy. This was the 1000th blade. Sarah stepped back. Her limbs felt heavy. The connection to Marcus was fuzzy, static-filled. The Void Sentinel was jamming her. The champion struck. It was fast. Impossibly fast for its size. Sarah barely blocked the strike, and the impact shattered her staff. She held the 2 broken halves, stumbling back. The champion didn't speak. It just advanced, a machine of inevitable death. It swung again. Sarah dodged, but the violet energy grazed her arm. Cold. Absolute zero cold spread through her veins. It wasn't physical cold, it was emotional numbness. She felt her will to fight draining away. Sarah! Marcus shouted, but his voice sounded miles away. She fell to the sand. The champion loomed over her, raising the sword for the final execution. By the fifth hour, Sarah was dying. Her armor was a ruin of shredded ceramic and exposed wiring. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her breath came in wet, rattling wheezes. She had dropped to one knee, and a mech-limbed berserker had swung a hammer at her head. She'd rolled, the wind of the weapon stirring her hair, and thrust her broken staff into the joint of the machine's knee. It had fallen. She tried to stand, but her legs refused. She retched, vomiting a splatter of iridescent, shimmering blood onto the white sand. It was a sign of resonant failure. Her nervous system was burning out. The crowd saw the blood. "She bleeds," a voice screamed from the stands. "Traitor's blood! Kill her! Kill the witch!" The sound of their hate was a physical weight. It pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than gravity. Sarah looked up at the stands. Thousands of faces, twisted in jeering ecstasy. They wanted her dead. They didn't care about the truth. They just wanted the show to end. Darkness crept into the edges of her vision. Her resonance dimmed, the bright world fading to gray. "I can't," she thought. "I can't do this." And she was alone, just a girl with a stick, fighting a mountain. Then the static in her ear cleared. "Sarah." It was Marcus. His voice wasn't panicked anymore. It was low, steady, and incredibly intimate. "Listen to me," Marcus said. "Don't look at the crowd. Look at me." Sarah lifted her head. She saw the glass cage. Marcus had his hand pressed against the glass, his palm open. "I am right here," Marcus said. "I am not going anywhere. You are not alone in that pit." Sarah closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, ignoring the screaming mob, ignoring the pain in her body. She searched for him. She found him instantly. It was like stepping from a blizzard into a warm room. She felt his heartbeat. Thump, thump. She felt his fierce, unyielding belief in her. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was only afraid for her. She remembered the pulse thread. She remembered the sensation of her forehead against his, the way his desire didn't take from her, but poured into her. It was a fuel source that burned cleaner than rage. "You are the truth," Marcus whispered. Sarah's eyes snapped open. The gray faded. The golden fire returned to her veins. She stood up. The crowd quieted, confused. She should have been dead. Sarah wiped the shimmering blood from her chin. She gripped the two broken halves of her staff. "Next," she rasped. Now she stood before the Void Sentinel, the creature that fed on fear. The champion raised its sword for the killing blow. Sarah looked up at the black mask. She looked into the void. She tried to find her anger. Gone. She tried to find her fear. Gone. What was left? Truth. The Void Sentinel fed on reaction. It fed on the emotional resistance of its victim. By fighting it, by hating it, she was powering it. Sarah dropped her broken staff. The crowd gasped. She rose to her knees, but she didn't raise her hands to defend herself. She looked straight at the black helmet. "You are empty," Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the arena, it carried. The champion paused. The sword hovered. "You are in pain," Sarah said. She wasn't using her resonance to push. She was using it to listen. She forced herself to listen to the silence. "They took everything from you. They hollowed you out to make you a weapon." The violet energy on the sword flickered. "But you are not a weapon," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. Not for herself, but for him. "You are a person. And I am sorry." It was an act of radical, suicidal empathy. She offered compassion to the thing designed to kill her. The Void Sentinel armor relied on the wearer being submerged in the target's fear, but Sarah wasn't afraid. She was grieving for him. The harmonic feedback loop shattered. The champion roared, a human pain sound from behind the mask. He stumbled back, clutching his helmet. The resonance dampener whined and sparked, overloaded by the sudden influx of genuine emotion. He dropped the sword. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the fallen greatsword. It was heavy, buzzing with dark power. She didn't kill him. She swung the flat of the blade, striking the champion's helmet with a resounding clang. He fell. He did not get up. Silence. Absolute stunned silence stretched across the Capitol. Sarah stood over the fallen champion, swaying, bleeding, holding a sword she could barely lift. She looked up at Draven's box. "I stand!" Sarah screamed, her voice breaking. "I stand!" By the ancient law, the trial was over. The crowd erupted. It wasn't the synchronized cheering of the regime. It was a chaotic, organic roar of shock and awe. Sarah dropped the sword. She collapsed to her knees, her vision swimming. A drone descended. The judge drone. "The challenge is met," the drone announced. "The survivor has the floor. State your demand." Sarah looked at the camera drone. She looked at the world. "I demand," she wheezed, "I demand the truth. Clarify." "A full broadcast tribunal," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "Uncut, uncensored. And every official involved must be oath-bound." "Processing." "Marcus, now!" Cage shouted. In the glass cage, Marcus hit the enter key. "Uploading Project Thresher," Marcus said. The giant screens around the arena, the screens that had been playing Draven's propaganda, flickered. Static. Then the file opened. The assassination order appeared clear as day, with Vorian's digital signature and Draven's authorization code. Video footage played. The real footage. It showed Marcus running toward the Chancellor, diving to save him. It showed the courier. It showed the edits being made in the War Office, time-stamped. It showed the plans to seize the wormhole corridor, the plans to sacrifice thousands of Veyron soldiers in a manufactured war. The crowd went silent again, but this was a different silence. It was the silence of a lie breaking. Sarah stood up. She looked at the camera. She knew Draven was watching. She knew he was terrified. She remembered his words. "Your love is a threat." Sarah looked straight into the lens. "You said my love was a threat," she said. Her voice was ragged, but it rang like iron. "You were right." She pointed to the screens, to the evidence, to the truth burning down the regime's narrative. "My love is the truth you cannot control." The arena exploded into chaos. Fights broke out in the stands. People were tearing down the banners of purity. The illusion of unity was gone. In the VIP box, Draven stared at the screen. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. "Shut it down," Draven screamed at his aides. "Shut it all down. Cut the planetary feed. Trigger the blackout. General, the grid is, do it." The lights in the arena flickered. The giant screens died. The city skyline outside the stadium went dark, sector by sector, as the regime pulled the plug on its own civilization to stop the signal. But in the darkness, the noise of the crowd only grew louder. The darkness that fell over New Cascadia was not merely an absence of light. It was a physical suffocation. General Draven had pulled the plug. The massive atmospheric stabilizers that kept the city glowing wound down into silence. The orbital mirrors tilted away, plunging the blade-bright towers into the deep violet shadow of the planet's natural twilight. But the city did not just go dark. It reacted. The living walls of the high spires, bioengineered coral structures that had breathed for centuries, sensed the sudden loss of power as a threat. They began to close. Great shutters of calcified bone ground shut over windows. The ventilation arteries constricted. The city was acting like an organism fighting an infection, sealing itself off vein by vein. In the confusion of the arena, the darkness was absolute. "Get him!" a warden commander screamed in the blackness. Marcus Thorne was trapped in the glass cage, suspended over a pit of screaming, rioting fans. The power cut had killed the maglev suspension. The cage lurched, dropping 10 feet before the emergency mechanical brake shrieked and caught the cable. Glass shattered. Marcus was thrown against the console. Sparks showered his face. He scrambled to his feet, coughing in the acrid smoke. "Cade," Marcus yelled into his comms. "I am dangling in a glass box over a riot. Options?" "Option A," Cade's voice crackled, barely audible over the jamming static. "Die with dignity. Option B, jump to the maintenance gantry on your left. You have 3 seconds before the brakes fail." Marcus looked to his left. A rusted metal catwalk jutted out from the darkness, barely visible in the strobe of dying emergency lights. It was 6 feet away. The cage groaned, metal sheared. Marcus didn't think. He ran 2 steps and launched himself through the shattered panel. He hit the grating hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Behind him, the glass cage tore free and plummeted into the crowd below. The sound of the crash was lost in the roar of the mob. "I am alive," Marcus gasped. Where is Sarah? She is in the pit, Kate said. My team is moving to extract her, but the purity wardens are sweeping the sands with thermal optics. If they find her, they will execute her on the spot. Get me down there, Marcus ordered, scrambling up the ladder. I am not leaving without her. You are an idiot, Kate said, sounding strangely affectionate. Head for Sector 7. We just blew a hole in the floor. The extraction was a blur of violence and shadow. Marcus met the rebel strike team in the service tunnels beneath the arena. They were dragging Sarah. She was conscious, but barely. Her armor was gone, stripped away to allow the medics to access her injuries. Her skin was pale. The bioluminescent glow of her resonance dimmed to a faint, flickering pulse. Marcus, she whispered as he knelt beside her. Her hand reached out, trembling, stained with the shimmering blue blood of her people. You're safe now, Marcus said, gripping her hand. Cade's got the shuttle ready. No, Sarah rasped. She tried to sit up, but the effort made her wheeze. We cannot leave, not yet. Sarah, you are dying, Marcus said, his voice cracking. You fought 1,000 soldiers. You won. It's over. It is not over, Sarah insisted. Her eyes, swollen and bruised, burned with a terrifying clarity. Draven cut the feed. The people saw the truth, but he is trying to erase it. If we flee now, he spins the narrative. He says we were terrorists who hacked the system. He executes you in absentia and declares war on the coalition. She is right, Kate said, stepping out of the shadows. The information broker was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, holding a stolen plasma rifle. The Senate is fracturing. Half of them want Draven's head. The other half are terrified of the fleet. Draven has ordered the first fleet to fire on the wormhole outpost in 20 minutes. Once the shooting starts, the truth won't matter. We have to finish the proof chain, Sarah said. We have to make the truth permanent. How? Marcus asked. The grid is down. The satellites are blind. Sarah looked at him. She squeezed his hand. The shrine, she said, in the archive. The city was a nightmare-scape of locked doors and prowling drones as they moved through the underlayers. But something strange was happening. As they approached the district of the old shrine, the air began to hum. It wasn't the mechanical hum of generators. It was the deep, resonant vibration of the planet itself. Do you feel that? Marcus asked, rubbing his chest. It is the pulse thread, Sarah whispered. She was leaning heavily on Marcus, her weight practically dead against his side. When we connected at the shrine, when we synced our heartbeats to the oath lock, we did not just open a file, Marcus. We woke it up. They burst into the cavern of the Shrine of the Weeping Sun. The space was no longer dark. The stone walls were glowing with a blinding golden light. The ancient moss had turned incandescent. The air was thick with static electricity, making their hair stand on end. The founders left a fail-safe, Sarah said, stumbling toward the altar. They knew that one day the Dominion might lose its way. They knew we might forget where we came from. She slumped against the stone altar. They built a beacon, Sarah said. A resonant beacon. It doesn't use radio waves. It uses the psychic field of the Veyron people. It projects memory directly into the mind. And it needs a key, Marcus realized. It needs us, Sarah said. The dual harmonic, the logic and the passion, the human and the alien. She looked at him. If we do this, Sarah warned, there is no going back. It will shatter the purity doctrine forever. It might break the minds of half the population. Better a broken mind than a shackled one, Marcus said. He took her hand. He placed his other hand on the glowing altar. Sarah did the same. Together, she whispered. They closed their eyes. Contact. It wasn't like the first time. It was an explosion. The energy surged through Marcus, a river of white-hot light. He felt Sarah's pain, her exhaustion, and her indomitable will. And then he felt something else. He felt the planet. The signal blasted outward from the shrine. It moved through the bedrock, up the crystal spires, into the atmosphere. It bypassed the jammed frequencies and the darkened screens. It hit every living Veyron in the city. In the streets, rioting citizens froze. In the barracks, soldiers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. The sky above the capital lit up, not with electricity, but with a massive atmospheric hologram projected by the city's own geomagnetic field. Two figures appeared in the sky, towering over the spires. One was a Veyron female, tall and shimmering. The other was a human male, short and scarred. They were holding hands. A voice, deeper than thunder, echoed across the capital. It spoke in the ancient tongue, but the meaning was pushed directly into the thoughts of the listeners. We are the seed. We are the root. There is no purity. There is only unity. The hologram shifted. It showed the history of the Dominion. It showed the first ships arriving, refugee ships from a human war, saved by Veyron mystics. It showed the intermingling of bloodlines, the shared technology, the centuries of cooperation that had been erased by revisionist history. The Veyron people were not pure. They were hybrids. Their technology, their culture, their very strength came from the union of two species. Purity was a lie. In the shrine, Marcus and Sarah gasped, breaking the connection. The hologram remained, self-sustaining now, looping the truth across the heavens. Cade walked over to the cave entrance and looked up at the sky, wiping blood from his eye. He laughed, a ragged, hysterical sound. "Look at that," Cade said. "The entire Dominion is collapsing. The religion is dead. The government is on fire." He turned to Marcus and Sarah. "And it is all because two idiots fell in love in the wrong century." Marcus slumped against the altar, catching his breath. "Sounds about right." "Don't get comfortable," Cade warned, checking his scanner. "That signal just pinpointed our location to every military asset in the hemisphere. Draven is coming." "Let him come," Sarah said. She stood up. The golden light of the beacon seemed to have recharged her. She looked weak, but dangerous. "This ends tonight." General Draven did not come with an army. He came with a gunship. The heavy transport roared over the open roof of the cavern, its downdraft whipping up a storm of dust. Draven descended on a gravity lift, flanked by his personal guard, the last four Void Sentinels. He looked insane. His uniform was disheveled, his eyes wild. He had lost his city. He had lost his narrative. All he had left was violence. "You ruined it!" Draven screamed, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "You polluted everything!" "We fixed it!" Sarah shouted back. "Look at the sky, General. Look at your history." "History is what I write," Draven roared. He gestured. The Void Sentinels blurred forward. Cade and the rebels opened fire, but the plasma bolts absorbed harmlessly into the black armor. "Marcus!" Sarah yelled. Before she could move, a gravity tether shot from Draven's gauntlet. It didn't hit Sarah, it hit Marcus. Marcus was yanked off his feet, flying across the cavern. Draven caught him by the throat, the metal fingers of his gauntlet locking tight. He pressed the barrel of his sidearm to Marcus's temple. "Stop!" Sarah screamed, freezing in place. Draven held Marcus up like a rag doll. "The fleet is holding fire," Draven snarled. "They are confused by your little light show, but I still have the command codes. I can incinerate the human outpost with one word." He looked at Sarah. "Renounce him," Draven commanded. "Get on your knees. Tell the galaxy that this archive is a fabrication. Tell them he forced you." "Sarah, don't," Marcus choked out, clawing at the metal hand crushing his windpipe. "If you do not," Draven hissed, "I will paint this shrine with his brains, and then I will burn the corridor anyway." The rebels lowered their weapons. Cade looked helpless. Sarah stood alone in the center of the cavern. The golden light of the Founders washed over her. She looked at Marcus. He was going to die. If she lied, she could save him. For a moment, she could buy him a breath. But she looked at his eyes. There was no pleading in them. There was terror. Yes, but there was also a fierce, stubborn demand. He was telling her no. "Choose what you can live with," Marcus gasped. "Don't let him own you, Sarah. Don't let him own the truth." He was refusing to be her weakness. He was demanding that she respect him enough to let him risk his life. Sarah looked at Draven. "You want me to beg?" Sarah said softly. "I want you to submit," Draven screamed. "I cannot submit," Sarah said. "I am not afraid of you anymore." She dropped her staff. "You are holding a man," Sarah said, walking forward. "But you are fighting a force of nature, General. You think love is soft? You think it is a vulnerability?" She kept walking. The Void Sentinels stepped in her way. Sarah didn't fight them. She didn't even look at them. She projected. She took the feeling in her chest, the absolute, terrifying, mountain-moving certainty of her love for Marcus, and she weaponized it. She pushed a wave of resonance so pure, so high frequency, that it hit the void armor like a sonic boom. The champion screamed. their dampeners overloaded. They collapsed, clutching their heads, incapacitated by the sheer volume of emotion. Sarah walked past them. "Stop!" Draven yelled, his hand shaking on the gun. "I will kill him!" "Then kill him," Sarah said, her voice breaking, but she didn't stop. "Kill him and you prove him right. Kill him and you make him a martyr that will burn your dominion to ash." She stopped 3 feet from Draven. She looked him in the eye. "But if you pull that trigger, Draven, I will not arrest you. I will not duel you. I will take your mind apart, neuron by neuron, and I will leave you screaming in the dark for eternity." Draven looked at her. He saw the truth in her eyes. He tasted the cold metal of her promise. He hesitated. That hesitation was all Marcus needed. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the only weapon he had left, the ceremonial throat scoop he had accidentally stolen from the gala. It was sharp as a razor. He jammed it into the gap in Draven's gauntlet, severing the hydraulic tendon. The hand loosened. Marcus dropped, rolled, and kicked Draven's knee backward. Draven roared and fired, but the shot went wide, shattering a crystal formation. Sarah was on him. She didn't use a weapon. She grabbed Draven's face with both hands. "Look at me!" she screamed. She forced a resonance link. Draven wasn't a reader. He had no shields. She tore into his mind. She didn't want to destroy him. She wanted to expose him. "Confess," Sarah commanded. "Oath bind it." The connection flared. Draven's eyes rolled back. His mouth opened, and words spilled out, not as scripted propaganda, but the raw, ugly contents of his soul. "I wanted power," Draven choked, his voice amplified by the acoustic geometry of the cave. "I made the threat. The humans were innocent. I wanted the war." It was an oath binding, a confession ripped from the subconscious. "Broadcast it," Sarah yelled to Cade. Cade hit the transmit key on his portable rig, patching the audio into the global feed that was still projecting the founder's message. Draven's confession echoed across the city. Every soldier, every citizen, every senator heard the general admit to treason. Draven collapsed as Sarah released him. He fell to the stone floor, weeping, not from remorse, but from the total shattering of his ego. The comms unit on Draven's belt chirped. "General?" a voice asked. It was the Admiral of the First Fleet. "We heard the transmission. We are standing down. We will not fire." Sarah stood over the broken general. She was shaking. Her energy was gone. She swayed, the world tilting. Marcus was there. He caught her before she hit the ground. "I'm here," he whispered, holding her tight. "Always." Sarah buried her face in his neck. She didn't cry. She just breathed. "It is done," she whispered. The aftermath was not a parade. It was a cleanup. The days that followed were a blur of tribunals, emergency Senate sessions, and the slow, painful process of rebooting a civilization. 3 weeks after the fall of the Purity regime, Sarah stood in the Grand Tribunal chamber. The room was packed, every seat filled, the air thick with tension. General Draven knelt in the center of the floor, stripped of rank, wearing prisoner grays. The scar across his left eye seemed deeper now, etched by shame rather than battle. The oath binding from the shrine had been entered as evidence. His own confession, extracted by Sarah's resonance, played on loop for the chamber to hear. "I wanted power. I made the threat. The humans were innocent. I wanted the war." The words echoed off the crystal walls. General Draven Cole, the Chief Justice, intoned, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of law. "You are found guilty of treason, murder of Magistrate Veyor, conspiracy to commit genocide, and crimes against the Dominion. You are sentenced to life imprisonment in the Outer Reaches penal colony." Draven didn't look at Sarah as they led him away in mag shackles. He looked empty. The man who had wielded fear like a weapon now felt nothing at all. Sarah felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. As the guards took Draven through the side door, Sarah caught a glimpse of another group being escorted in. 4 men in medical gowns, walking slowly, flanked by rehabilitation specialists. The Void Sentinels. The 4 who had attacked the shrine were found alive after the battle. The resonance overload had fried their armor's neural interfaces but hadn't killed them. When the tech teams removed the Void armor, they found broken men beneath, veterans of the Unification Wars, conscripted into the program against their will, their minds conditioned through torture and psychic manipulation. Sarah visited them later that afternoon in the medical wing. The man she'd faced in the arena, the thousandth blade, sat by a window staring out at the city. When he heard her footsteps, he turned. His eyes were human now, tired, but human. "Hi, counselor," he said quietly. "Just Sarah," she corrected, sitting in the chair beside him. "I'm not High Counselor anymore." She had declined reappointment. The title felt like a cage. "I wanted to thank you," the man said. His voice was rough, unpracticed. "For seeing me. When I was in there, I couldn't feel anything. The armor, it ate everything. Fear, love, hope. But when you spoke to me, when you said I wasn't a weapon." He paused, his hands trembling. "It was the first time in 5 years I remembered I had a name." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "What is your name?" she asked. "Kael," he whispered. "My name is Kael." "It's good to meet you, Kael," Sarah said. "You were never a weapon. You were always a person." Tears ran down Kael's face, the first tears he'd shed in half a decade. The Senate worked around the clock to rebuild. Admiral Kalen Frost, commander of the First Fleet, personally delivered Draven's command codes to the new Provisional Senate. Frost was a tall, weathered Veyron with gray streaking his temples and a voice like gravel. "We followed orders we believed lawful," Frost said, standing before the assembled senators. His jaw was tight with shame. "We were wrong. We will not make that mistake again." The Senate passed the Transparency Act within 48 hours. All military operations now required multi-party oversight, with mandatory review by civilian analysts. No single general could ever again consolidate the power Draven had wielded. The Purity movement was officially disbanded. Its leaders faced investigation. Some fled to the outer colonies. Most were arrested. Half the old Senate resigned in disgrace, those who had enabled Draven, either through cowardice or complicity. New elections were called, the first truly open elections in 12 years. Candidates from the Undercity ran alongside candidates from the Crystal Spires. For the first time in a generation, the voices of the lower districts would be heard in the halls of power. Marcus worked 18-hour days drafting the new Terran-Veyron cooperation framework. The treaty was complex, spanning hundreds of pages, trade agreements, military non-aggression pacts, cultural exchange programs, and joint scientific initiatives. Sarah sat in on the negotiations, no longer as High Counselor. She'd turned down that role, but as Special Envoy for Truth and Reconciliation. Her job was to ensure that the new government didn't bury its mistakes, that the truth, no matter how painful, remained visible. The work was slow, exhausting, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. On the night of the treaty signing, Marcus found Sarah on the observation deck of the Senate Spire. The twin suns were setting, no longer scrutinizing, just shining. The sky was painted in shades of violet and gold. The city below sparkled with new light, warmer than before, less clinical. The hologram still played every night, two figures holding hands, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been found. "So," Marcus said, leaning on the railing beside her bro, "we've rebuilt a government, disbanded a fascist movement, and rewrote 500 years of history." "Just another Tuesday," Sarah said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "There's one thing we haven't done," Marcus said. "What's that?" Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket. Sarah's breath caught. He opened it. Inside were two rings, one made of Veyron crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, the other made of human platinum, polished to a mirror shine. They were forged together, intertwined, inseparable. "We haven't made it official," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but Sarah could feel his nervousness through the air, a flutter of hope and fear. "Sarah Vex, will you marry me? Not for politics, not for symbolism, just because I can't imagine a future without you." Sarah looked at the rings, at the way the crystal and metal wound around each other, neither dominating, both supporting. She looked at Marcus, at the man who had refused to let her sacrifice herself, who had fought beside her, not for her. She looked at the city below where the hologram still played, two figures holding hands, proof that unity was stronger than purity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Marcus slid the ring onto her finger. The crystal pulsed once, bright and warm, as if recognizing her. Sarah took the platinum ring and placed it on Marcus's hand. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, watching the sun set on the old world. You know, Marcus said softly, Draven was right about one thing. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Our love is a threat, Marcus said. It threatens lies. It threatens tyranny. It threatens everyone who profits from keeping people afraid. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. Good, she said. Let them be afraid of the truth for once. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon. The city lights came on below, thousands of them, like stars being born, and high above the hologram flickered to life once more. Two figures, holding hands, a Veyron and a human. We are the seed. We are the root. There is no purity. There is only unity. The message looped across the sky, burning bright against the gathering dark. A promise, a warning, a beginning. Sarah and Marcus stood on the observation deck, rings gleaming on their fingers, and watched their city, their world, remake itself. The century was young, and they would rewrite it together.